The candlelight flickers along cracked stone. Outside, crickets gnaw at the edges of silence. A warm wind rustles faded leaves, carrying with it a scent of wood smoke, sweat, and a perfume long since out of fashion. You're safe now, somewhere between dusk and a story. A story that should probably come with a warning, but doesn't. Not because it's safe, but because warnings wouldn't help. Before we step into it, a quick breath. If you like strange tales told in gentle voices, where the monstrous hums under the surface of elegance, go ahead and like, subscribe, and tap the bell. No sharp noises, just soft footsteps echoing through history. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. In the scorched basin of the Songhai Empire, far past the gilded maps of European scribes and the well-mannered kingdoms of the Nile, there once rose a king known more by whispers than by name. His throne was ivory, his crown a loop of lion's mane braided with gold, and his madness, well, that was the true regalia. To the children in Gao, he was the man who hears blood. To the traders from Morocco, he was King Abdel the Unquiet. In the official court histories, those scrubbed of discomfort, he appears briefly under the name Daoud II, a name that feels entirely too polite for what's coming. Let's start at the river. The Niger, slow and warm, licks its banks like a lazy serpent. Around its bend lies a compound of red clay walls and sharp, purposeful silence. Here, in 1592, the kingdom of Songhai is dying, though no one dares speak it aloud. The Moroccans are pressing south with arquebusiers and alchemists, gold shipments are vanishing en route to Timbuktu, and in the palace, a man who once wept at poetry now tests blades on live goats. But let's not rush. Daoud II was not always like this. Once, he was a sweet-faced boy in a silk tunic, fond of dried apricots and the smell of old scrolls. His mother, a Fulani concubine turned queen consort, taught him the language of winds and how to read without moving his lips. He had a slow, musical voice, and he often stared too long at shadows. People said he was touched by the jinn. Not cursed, touched. The difference is important. He was 13 when his father was found dead in the palace gardens, his throat pressed neatly open like the mouth of a smiling fish. The official tale blamed a scorpion bite. The truth? No one wanted it. Daoud wept publicly, then stopped, just like that. 2 days later he was crowned. The sun that morning was too large, too orange. It made everything feel slightly unreal, like a story someone was remembering wrong. He began well enough, issued coinage with his face on it, pardoned petty criminals, consulted with the university elders in Timbuktu. But something inside him itched. He once called his advisors tamarind-flavored insects for disagreeing with him in council. His eyes changed when he got angry, widened, darkened, as if someone else was peering through them. And then came the dreams. He claimed a voice visited him at night. Not a god, not a spirit. "It is my own soul," he told his priest scribes. But louder, and with more teeth. He built a listening room in the deepest part of the palace, a square chamber lined with goat hide and the powdered bones of his ancestors. There, he sat in silence for hours, sometimes days. Servants brought food and incense. He never touched them. Just sat, breathing like a tide. It was during this time that he began to eat strange things. First, he insisted on lion meat, raw, salted with sand. Then goat eyes, fermented for 3 days. Then frogs, still twitching. One day, he summoned a boy from the kitchens. The boy was 10. Small, with crooked teeth and eyes too wide for his face. Daoud asked him what he feared most. The boy said, "Being alone in the dark." Daoud nodded. "Me too." The boy was never seen again. There was no body, no scream. Just a blot of oil on the sandstone and a stain that never quite scrubbed out. After that, the rumors became sharper. That Daoud drank marrow like wine. That he peeled the tongues of liars with a golden fish hook. That once, during the Harmattan, he gnawed off a guard's fingers because he dreamed they were snakes. Some of it's probably false. But not all. Let's not forget the old doctor from Marrakesh, sent by the Sultan himself. A thin man, with hands like spider legs and a gentle stutter. He was tasked with calming the prince. He left 3 days later, barefoot, bleeding from the ears, muttering, "It's not illness. It's theater." And he was right. Daoud didn't hide his madness. He choreographed it. Every breakdown was a performance. Every howl of grief carefully staged for an audience of terrified officials and silent gods. Still, some tried to help him. There was Zara, his second wife, a poetess from Jen with laughter like wind chimes. She brought him paper soaked in rosewater and told him stories of her mother's village, where people danced on rooftops. For a time, it worked. Daoud smiled again. He even painted strange, spiraling murals in charcoal and dye, half of them depicting birds with human eyes. Then one morning, Zara disappeared. Her slippers were found near the river, still warm. Daoud wept for 3 days straight, then ordered every painter in the city to be blinded. "They see too much," he said. "I can't have competition." And so the kingdom tilted. Priests mumbled blessings backwards. Children were told to avoid the palace at dusk. Dogs howled and refused to enter the central square. Then came the first feast. He announced it with silk banners and the sound of flutes. A public banquet, whole roasted cattle, pyramids of dates, dancers with bronze masks. The nobles sat nervously, chewing without tasting. And then Daoud rose, lifted a goblet carved from elephant tusk, and said, "I am healing." The crowd cheered because it was safer than silence. "Every day," he continued, "the voice within me grows quieter. I've learned the medicine. It's flesh, human flesh. Eaten warm. Eaten slow." Laughter, polite and confused, fluttered through the court. He smiled and pointed to his servant. They brought out a man bound in silk cords, his personal scribe. The man wept. Daoud, still smiling, produced a curved blade. "Forgive me, brother," he whispered, "but I must be well." He cut carefully, with something like reverence. The music did not stop. The court sat frozen, chewing, nodding, pretending. No one left. Not that night. And so, the feast became tradition. Once a month. Sometimes more. Always someone different. Always someone loyal. The implication was clear: proximity to the king was dangerous. But staying away was worse. Because madness, like fire, demands oxygen. And Daoud's court had become very flammable. But there's more to this than gore and fear. There's something else, too, something older. Something that crawled out of the bones of empire and wrapped itself around the young king like a lover. A whisper that said, "You're not broken. You're chosen." And Daoud believed it. But the kingdom had other plans. The rains failed. The northern roads collapsed into bandit territory. The gold mines in Beray ran dry. And far to the north, the Sultan of Morocco sharpened his interest. But that's a storm we'll meet soon. For now, the air is thick with dust and secrets. The king sleeps. The moon leans low. We'll pick it up again soon. A thin breath of dawn slides across the walls of Gao like a reluctant confession. It spills over baked clay and copper rooftops, washing the world in that short-lived, silver stillness just before everything begins to burn again. You can smell the blood in the dust now, if you know what to look for. The palace breathes slowly. A low, sleeping animal. Inside, Daoud dreams of rivers. Not the Niger, not anymore. He dreams of crimson streams winding through marble halls, of voices chanting in a tongue he swears he knew before he was born. His sheets are soaked. A slave girl wipes his brow with water and camphor. Her hands do not tremble. She knows not to let them. Because Daoud has entered what his courtiers have come to call the soft season. It's not peace. It's not sanity. It's simply the in-between, those days when the king's rage flickers and dims, when he walks the garden and smells the frangipani, when he speaks in whispers and plays old songs on the harp. He doesn't eat people during the soft season. He writes letters. He composes verses to the gods of air and sleep. He traces the backs of his fingers along the cold stone walls and weeps, quietly, without reason. One such day, Daoud calls for his cousin Mahmoud. Mahmud is one of the few who hasn't yet fled, bribed, or vanished. He is, quite literally, the last blood relative standing, and only because he walks with care, speaks with less, and always smiles like someone who knows a secret. Mahmud arrives in his usual way, kneeling first, eyes on the floor, fingers splayed like a priest offering nothing. You called, Majesty? Daoud turns, his eyes distant. Do you remember the jackal we caught in the orchard? Mahmud nods. It screamed like a child. Daoud smiles. Yes. Exactly like a child. I thought, perhaps, it had a soul. And I wondered for weeks where it went when we broke its spine. He walks to the window, lifts a curtain. Outside, the garden sleeps under mist. I think mine left too, he adds. But it didn't go far. It's watching me. Somewhere nearby. Mahmud says nothing. His silence is rehearsed. It is his only shield. Daoud speaks again. I need you to bring me a witch. A witch, my king? One who eats light. One who walks backward. One who knows the names of unmaking. Mahmud doesn't flinch. He bows deep and low. Yes, my king. He leaves that same night, under the black veil of Harmattan clouds. And Daoud returns to silence. But silence in the palace is never empty. The scribe's desk still stands near the central hall. Dust has collected in the inkpots. A single parchment remains, stained with blood at the edges. Written on it, the king believes eating the loyal binds their faith to his flesh. The more devout the meal, the quieter the voice. The handwriting is sharp, trembling. It belongs to the man Daoud filleted 2 months ago. The doors to the feasting room are kept closed now, but the smell lingers. And yet, the kingdom continues. Gao still hums with life, stubbornly. Women in blue veils haggle over spices, smiths beat rhythm into copper pots, griots recite the deeds of kings who died with their minds intact. At the edge of the market, an old woman sells dolls, woven from straw, dyed red, faces painted with charcoal. One of them looks exactly like the king. People don't mention it. They just pay in silence. Far north, in the high Atlas, Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur listens to reports by candlelight. The king of Songhai grows unstable, says his general, Ben Zidane. He consumes his own men. His vizier fled to Bornu last week. The gold routes are in shambles. Al-Mansur strokes his beard. Good, he says simply. Madness makes conquest easier. Ben Zidane shifts uneasily. And the voice, my sultan? Which voice? The one they say speaks to him at night. The sultan's eyes narrow. Even a dog can bark to itself. That doesn't mean it speaks with angels. Still, he commissions a fresh map of Songhai, marking every village, every mine, every river bend. He does not yet know that Daoud has seen him in dreams. Back in Gao, the witch arrives. Mahmud finds her in the salt plains beyond the dunes, a woman with skin like ironwood and eyes like riverstone. She does not bow when she enters. Her name is Dala. She was once a healer, until her cures stopped working and her patients came back changed. She carries a pouch of hyena teeth and a necklace made from the knuckles of kings. Daoud greets her with open arms. He looks relieved. I was afraid you weren't real, he says. I'm not, Dala answers. For 3 days she stays in the palace. No one sees what happens. No one hears. The doors are shut. On the 4th day, Daoud reemerges. His face is smeared with white ash. His voice is different, lower, smoother, with a rhythm like falling water. He cancels the next feast. Orders the feasting room burned. The court whispers, is he healed? Not quite. Something's changed, but not cured. He now speaks in riddles. Paints sigils on the walls in goat blood. Sleeps in the gardens. He says the moon is closer than before. He says the stars are listening again. And at night he writes letters to someone he calls the river bride. None are sent. All are buried. Zara, the poetess who vanished, had once called him a man born 2 inches outside the world. Now he's fully outside, and the air around him has started to bend. One night, a guard enters his chamber and finds him levitating 6 inches above the bed. He screams. Daoud falls, laughs, apologizes, then weeps. "Do you see?" he says. "I'm becoming something new." A week later, he orders all historians in Gao to be hanged. "History lies," he says. "It remembers what should be forgotten." He has his royal annals burned, coins reminted with no face, dates abolished. "This," he says, "is year 0. And so it is. The empire dissolves beneath his feet. Vassal states rebel. Desert raiders sack the outskirts. Traders vanish or turn to piracy. And still, Daoud dreams. He says the voice is quiet now. Not gone, just humming, pleased. Because Daoud has made a pact. With what, he doesn't say. But his eyes glow faintly in the dark. He whispers to plants. Birds land on his shoulders. Even the palace cats watch him with uneasy reverence. He tells his ministers, "I was never meant to rule. I was meant to unmake." And then he smiles. A slow, soft smile. The kind you might see on the face of someone watching their own reflections sink beneath the water. The rains return late that year, shy and thin. In the fields outside Jen, millet stalks bowed low like old men too tired to stand. Children kicked dust instead of puddles. The elders muttered that the gods had turned their faces away, or perhaps they'd simply lost interest. Back in Gao, Daoud II walked barefoot through the ashes of his archives. The paper burned strangely, fast, but not bright. History, it seems, makes for a smoky fire. He wore no crown now, only a necklace of bone and silk. His court had thinned. The surviving ministers avoided his gaze. Even Mahmud, ever smiling, had begun sleeping with a blade sewn into his sleeve. But Daoud didn't seem to notice. Or care. He spent his days carving symbols into stone, speaking to no one, smiling at things that weren't there. The people whispered. They said the king had become something else. That he could no longer be killed by normal means. That his flesh had thickened, his soul had split, his blood now ran in 2 colors, red and white. And then came the trembling. It began with birds. First, they stopped singing. Then they began to fall from the sky. Not dead, just still. Eyes open. Heart slowed. Daoud took this as confirmation. "The pact holds," he said. "The change has begun." No one asked what change. But they felt it. The air thickened. The moon hung lower. Dreams began to repeat. Children in this city began speaking in languages their parents didn't know. People aged overnight, or stopped aging entirely. Time began to slip, not by much, just enough that water sometimes boiled before the fire was lit. And through it all, Daoud smiled. He no longer held court. He held sessions, sitting cross-legged, offering riddles, speaking in parables about flesh and stars, about the architecture of silence and the geometry of hunger. One day, he told his people, "You are all dying backwards. Soon you will be born again. But not as yourselves." No one clapped. They just went home, quietly, and checked their reflections for cracks. And then he vanished. For 3 weeks, the king was gone. The palace sat hollow. Unlit. Guards refused to enter. Mahmud took temporary command. The nobles whispered of revolt. Then Daoud returned. Naked. Glowing faintly. Accompanied by birds, none of which moved their wings. He said simply, "I have seen the final city. And I have tasted its king." He slept for 2 days straight. When he awoke, he demanded 5 of his own teeth be removed. "They itch," he said. They complied. North again, the Moroccans marched. Cannon crews. Musketeers. Sorcerers in black veils. They followed maps written in blood. Al-Mansur sent a final message to Gao. "Surrender. Or be rewritten." Daoud replied with a single word. "Soon." It was not the answer of a desperate man. It was the answer of someone finishing a very long ritual. And the hourglass, finally, was running out. Soon, the final feast would come, not for healing, but for closure. A devouring. A ritual that would make even gods blink. But for now, the air was still. And the king was humming. Night unfurled over Gao not like a curtain drawn but like ink spilled from a careless hand, slow, permanent, seeping into every crack of the city. The sky was wrong again. The moon had grown impatient, no longer content to remain in its proper place. It hovered crooked in the west like a question someone was too afraid to ask. Stars twitched. They flickered like they were laughing, too loud, too close. People whispered prayers without faith, tucked children into closets, not beds. Windows were boarded, not latched. Smoke rose from incense bowls left burning too long, the air thick with herbs meant to keep the old things out. But the old things were already here. The city knew. The sand knew. The river bent slightly away from the palace now, as if the earth itself was learning how to flinch. Inside the palace walls, nothing moved unless Daoud moved. The very architecture held its breath. His footsteps were slow, padded, like something stalking within a dream. He no longer wore robes or rings or gold. He wore stillness. He wore something invisible that terrified even the cats, who now refused to enter his chambers. The throne had long been abandoned. It sat cracked and webbed with salt, ivy growing up through the lion carvings. The seat still held a scent, blood, saffron, burnt teeth. Daoud had no need for thrones now. He slept on the floor, if he slept at all. In these final days he began to hum, not words, not melodies, but frequencies. Notes that curled the ears inward and made water ripple without touch. Sometimes glass shattered. Sometimes people bled from the nose. His hums grew longer. More frequent. Each one seemed to peel a layer of reality back, just slightly, like lifting the corner of a map to find something crawling beneath. Mahmud was the last to speak to him. It happened not in a chamber, but on a terrace at dusk. The sun hovered like a dying ember, the sky bruised and wide. Mahmud stood carefully beside the king, keeping just enough distance that a man could turn and strike and still miss. "You can still choose to live," Mahmud said, voice low. "There are still pieces left." Daoud turned. "There are always pieces," he said. "But some things are not meant to be reassembled." He looked out again, toward the river's curl and the crumbling spires. "I was never meant to rule," he said. "I was meant to remember. And then to release." Mahmud didn't speak again. He left that night, wrapped in gray, his face unpainted, his shadow trailing behind him like an apology. What followed in the palace was not a feast. It was a ritual. The final consumption. Daoud prepared alone. He cleansed himself in ash and honey. Scraped his skin with sharpened shells. His arms were covered in runes, some written in his own blood, others carved so deep the skin could not grow back. He laid the room in circles, 24 in total. Each with a name. Each a story. Each a person who had once pledged loyalty, not out of fear, but out of belief. They came at dawn. They did not wear chains. These were not prisoners. They came willingly, clothed in silence. There were no words. No pleas. No ritual cries. They each kissed his palm. Then lay down. And Daoud began. He did not use knives. He used his hands, and his teeth, and something deeper than hunger. It was not frenzy. It was not violence. It was reverent. He wept. He chewed slowly. He held each piece in his mouth like a priest holds wine, letting it rest, letting it speak. He said the names aloud. Not in fear, not in guilt. In gratitude. One by one. The room grew dim. The air folded in on itself. And when it was done, he lay in the center. Bones around him arranged like constellations. His own skin pulsing faintly, faintly, like something almost reborn. He slept there for 3 days. Outside, the people didn't speak. Birds perched motionless on rooftops. The river hissed against the bank. And in the far north, the Moroccan army reached the edge of the city. But Gao had already ceased. Not burned. Not bombarded. It had quietly stopped. Like a candle, not blown out, but finished. The Moroccans found nothing they could rule. Only silence. Only bones. Only a throne made of birds. They took what gold they could find, planted their flag, and left. But they did not sleep soundly again. Not ever. Because they had walked into the story of a man who had unmade himself so thoroughly, even the gods paused to watch. And something about that lingers. Something about that does not forget. Let us not begin this part with a king. Let us begin with a boy. Small. Thin. Eyes too large for his face. A soft tunic hanging unevenly on narrow shoulders. He is not yet anyone. He is still Daoud, but not the Daoud. Not the one who would unravel history and consume faith like roasted meat. Not the one who would split time open like a pomegranate. This Daoud is 6. And he is in love with birds. He watches them from the garden window, doves, swifts, that one insolent hawk who keeps stealing fruit from the trees. He has names for them all. He once tried to fly by tying papyrus sheets to his arms. He broke his ankle. He did not cry. His mother brought him baobab fruit and sang until the pain blurred into something quieter. She was soft-spoken, but when she was angry, her voice cracked like thunder. She was Fulani, and she carried her homeland in the slope of her spine. She told him stories not from the scrolls, but from the wind, of spirits who whispered secrets to children, of rivers that remembered your name long after you died. This room was small. A mat. A jug of water. A window facing east. He would wake with the sun. The light would spill across the floor in soft shapes, and he would trace them with his fingers like they were ancient runes waiting to be read. He kept a book under his mat. Riddles. Most without answers. He didn't want the answers. He liked the ache of the question. He liked that some things didn't want to be solved. He fed sparrows from the windowsill. He whispered to the moon. He once buried a frog and said a prayer. He did not yet know why. There's a stillness to this memory. Not innocence, but a kind of untouchedness. A pause before the breath. A page before the story begins. And beneath everything he became, beneath the madness and the hunger and the humming, this boy still flickered. A quiet ember inside a howling storm. And maybe, just maybe, that is what endured. Because even if the world forgets kings, even if cities are swallowed and names unspoken, somewhere, a bird lands on a windowsill. Somewhere, a boy listens. Somewhere, the light moves slowly across the floor. And something in the world remembers how to be gentle. Now the night has thickened again, not with fear this time, but with hush. The kind of hush that happens after rain, when leaves are heavy and the wind only nudges them. The story we've walked together, strange, cracked, full of teeth, rests now. Not ended, no. Just resting. You may feel the shadows still. Their edges tucked into the folds of your thoughts. Let them soften. Let the palace dissolve into vapor. Let the king sleep. In this moment you are safe. The past is no longer biting. The fire has faded to coals. And there is nothing left to understand, only to remember. And then to release. Let yourself drift. Let the last images fade like ash in a river. A bird lands. A breeze stirs a curtain. And a silence that once held a scream now holds only breath.